Look at the fork in your hand. Not the phone, not the screen, the actual fork. Chances are it has 4 tines, not 3, not 5, 4. And here's the strange part. You've probably used thousands of forks in your life without ever questioning why that number became the standard. Spoons vary in size, knives come in all shapes, but forks almost always have 4 tines. So why do forks have exactly 4 tines? It turns out that this simple design choice is the result of centuries of trial, error, cultural resistance, engineering tweaks, and even a little bit of social drama. The fork didn't just appear fully formed, it evolved, and the number 4 wasn't random. Before forks became normal, people mostly ate with their hands, knives, and spoons. In medieval Europe, knives were common personal tools. You carried your own knife to meals. It was used to cut food, spear meat, and sometimes even bring it directly to your mouth. Elegant? Not exactly. Practical? Yes. Forks did exist, but they were rare and often had just 2 tines. Early versions appeared in the Byzantine Empire and later in parts of Italy. When forks began spreading across Europe around the 11th century, they weren't instantly embraced. In fact, they were controversial. Some religious figures in medieval Europe criticized forks as unnecessary luxury. When a Byzantine princess introduced the fork to Venice in the 11th century, some clergy reportedly saw it as excessive refinement, almost an insult to the idea that humans should eat with the hands God gave them. It sounds dramatic, but table manners were deeply tied to morality and class. At this stage, forks usually had 2 tines and were mainly used to hold food steady while cutting, not for scooping or twirling. 2 tines worked fine for spearing solid foods, like chunks of meat, but they weren't very versatile. Imagine trying to eat peas, rice, or pasta with a 2-pronged fork. Small pieces would slip right through, soft foods would fall apart. As cuisine became more varied, especially in Italy and later France, people needed utensils that could handle more delicate dishes. Pasta became increasingly popular in Italy, and twirling spaghetti with only 2 tines was far from ideal. So, designers began experimenting. During the Renaissance period, 3-tined forks started appearing. The extra tine made a noticeable difference. Food was easier to hold, and pasta became easier to twirl. But 3 still wasn't perfect. The balance wasn't quite right. When you press a fork into food, you apply downward pressure. With 3 tines, that force distribution isn't perfectly symmetrical. 1 tine sits in the center, while the other 2 sit on each side. It works, but it's slightly less stable. 4 tines, however, create a more even structure. 2 on each side, balanced, symmetrical, structurally sound. This isn't just aesthetic, it affects how the fork feels in your hand and how smoothly it enters food. A 4-tined fork glides in more evenly and holds food more securely. Just as importantly, it creates a shallow scoop between the tines that helps with semi-solid foods like mashed potatoes, salads, or pasta. The fork suddenly becomes both a spear and a scoop. That dual function is key. By the 17th and 18th centuries, forks with 4 tines began dominating European table settings, particularly in France. As dining etiquette became more refined, utensils became more specialized. The fork transformed from a luxury curiosity into an everyday necessity. 4 tines hit the perfect balance between function and practicality. They provide a stronger grip than 2 or 3. They're not too wide or bulky. They're strong enough without bending easily. They're simple to manufacture, and they're comfortable to eat with. And that last detail matters more than you might think. 5 or more times would make the fork wider. That might help hold more food, but it would also make it awkward to bite from. The human mouth has a natural width limit for comfort, and 4 tines fit that space naturally. Today, there are still variations. Salad forks might have 3 or 4 tines. Dessert forks are usually smaller. Seafood forks can have narrower or differently shaped prongs, but the standard dinner fork almost always has 4. In some regions, you might still see three-tined forks, especially in older European designs. But globally, four dominates. It's the quiet winner of centuries of design competition. There's also something psychological at play. Once a design becomes standard, it shapes our expectations. Children grow up using four-tined forks. Cutlery trays are molded for them. Table settings around the world are built around that size and shape. If someone handed you a five-tined dinner fork tomorrow, you would notice immediately. It would feel strange, even if it worked perfectly fine. The fork isn't just a tool anymore. It's part of our cultural routine. So, the next time you sit down for a meal, pause for a moment before taking your first bite. Look at your fork. Four tines. Not because of coincidence, not just because of tradition, but because over hundreds of years, that number proved to be the most efficient, balanced, and practical design for the way humans eat. It's a reminder that even the simplest objects around us carry stories. Stories of culture, engineering, habit, and human preference.